首先这里说一下。
First of all, I would like to address a few things.
今天我们那个金刚项目组这边也开了一些教务方面的会议。
Well, the
基本上那个下一年
management team of the Chinese Sangha sector had a few meetings today, and we came to consensus regarding to the content of study and the time of study and so on. At least the majority of them are set, and a few of them are still to be decided. In terms of the Vajrayana classes, I think a majority of the Tantra teachings have already completed in various classes, and I think it's necessary to study those Vajrayana texts again and again so that you can generate a firm understanding. Just like when people study, for example, clear realization or Madhyamika, it is necessary for you to repeatedly to study those texts and on those subjects for 2 or 3 times so that you can then be confident in that view. Some Kambos and Kemmels need to comply with the arrangement made by the management team. Otherwise, if the different Kambos and Kemmels have different ideas and different wishes, some may prone to give the teachings on the Chinese classicals and some may on the other subjects, then it would be very difficult to manage the entire Sangha. So I think it's necessary to follow some schedules and some general arrangements. If you really wish to teach on a specific text, then you can come to me and you can then tell me the reasons, and then maybe we can make arrangements. Also, I think it's necessary for us to have a general curriculum overall so that every Dharma teacher have their way to arrange the classes and the time of the classes and so on. Also, when it comes to the different dispositions of people, it is not only based on the characteristics or only on wisdom and only on a specific aspect of a person. Rather, it is to see every aspect in general. And what's more important is that if a person can comply with others and get along with others. Otherwise, if you were to have difficulty to get along with anyone and everyone, that would be quite difficult for you to stay in the Sangha. Also, it applies to the disciples as well. The Education and Curriculum Department made the arrangement and decision on this year's curriculum. If you really don't want to comply with everyone, then that is fine. I know how to teach myself. It is not that we beg of you to give the teachings. So I hope that you can comply with the group decision and seize that opportunity to share the Dharma with the fellow Sangha members and make connections in this way. Otherwise, if you don't comply with this, don't comply with that, it's hard to say what kind of result you will get later. This is a very important matter. After studying over here for so long, if you don't want to pick any class, I think it is not necessary for you to continue to stay in Larunga. And maybe you don't have that special connection to stay and study in Larunga. The water, the electricity is here to support the Sangha member to support those who serve and study at Larunga. So if you do not study in any of the classes, if you do not get enrolled in any of the classes, then it is necessary for you not to use those provisions and infrastructures. Also, if you were to be over the age limits, then I think it is necessary for you to voluntarily depart from here. Because as Buddhists, we don't want to force anyone to leave. However, if some of you who really don't meet any of those requirements, then we will have to take some measures. And maybe for those of you to stay here could bring up lots of obstacles as well. Maybe the third time around of the overall management from the authorities. There was something else I wanted to address, but I can't quite remember. Can't remember now. Well, we'll see.
The answer past profound and wonderful Dharma is difficult to encounter in billions of aeons. I now see it, hear it, receive and uphold it, about to fathom the Buddha's true meaning, to liberate all beings. Let's generate the supreme bodhicitta. Now let us begin our class on the Surangama Sutra. Previously, we've already covered on the 5 aggregates and the 6 entrances, and today we will get to the 12 ayatanas, or the 12 places. Today we will cover on the form and seeing. Initially, I wanted to bring a crystal ball that everyone could see, but the one that I have at my home is rather very heavy. So later when I talk about the form, then you can look at a Buddha statue that's right in front of you, or you can prepare anything that's right in front of you so that you can look at it. And then by gazing at that thing, we will talk about what this eye consciousness is. We'll talk about the production of eye consciousness. So that's the first thing that we will talk about. And then later we will also talk about the sound and then hearing. Later we will also play a sound, a piece of sound or music recording. After that, we will also cover on fragrance. Usually we have some incense that's burned over here. For those of you who listen to this class at home, you can also light an incense at your home or anything that's fragrant to your nose. And we will talk about how fragrance is connected to the nose. In the Vajrayana teaching and the empowerment especially, usually we will cover the 6 roots, the 6 places, and the 6 consciousness. By looking at those, by having those experiences, we'll recognize our nature of mind. Let it be nature of mind, nature of consciousness. In fact, at first glance, the Surangama Sutra, it may seem that it's no other than some Buddhist logic, but if we were to look further with it, it could help us to recognize, in fact, the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, and body, or the form, sound, smell, taste, and touch. We will be able to make observation and see how they are and what are the causes and conditions that produce them and how we grasp onto them. At the time of grasping onto them, in fact, there is no solid existence to any of those at all. People usually would say that, oh, if I see it, it must be true. If we hear it, it must be true. But those are no other than our habitual patterns. To break this cycle of habitual patterns is not that easy. In our mind stream, in fact, there is a very deep clinging to habitual tendency, and that could make us
have lots of confusion. After we have confusion, then the appearance would be even more solid. Just like a chronically ill person, for example, who has a jaundice, whatever that person looks, they will be in the color gold or yellow. Since this is a chronic illness, that patient has to take medicine and to take care of him or herself, and then slowly that illness or that symptom will be cleared, and then the clarity of seeing would appear. Many of you have already studied beacon of certainty, and many sutras and shastras that discuss about that, so it must be very simple for you to understand. But I think through the direct teaching from the Buddha, through this direct pointing out instructions, you will be able to recognize what the eye consciousness, ear consciousness, and nose consciousness is. You'll get more clarity on it. Now let's continue with today's teaching. The Buddha said, moreover, in Tibetan's Dini, and then the Buddha over here says that after giving teachings on the 6 entrances, the Buddha said, moreover, Ananda, why do I say that the 12 places are basically the wonderful nature of true suchness, the treasury of the thus come one? Why the 12 places are the wonderful nature of true suchness? In Vajrayana teachings, there are clear explanations of the nature of the 12 ayatanas. But in Sutrayana over here, it simply gives the gist of it. It simply says that the 12 ayatanas are simply the wonderful manifestation of the luminous Buddha nature. It is simply a manifestation. How does it manifest, you may ask? Well, if we were to look at it from the second turning of the Dharma wheel, first of all, we need to come to the certainty that it is empty. However, there is non-extinguished manifestation. And that is just the nature of Buddha nature. That is the character of the Buddha nature, because it has that wondrous function. There are lots of terms to describe it, wondrous manifestation, the function. But if we were to understand the Surangama Sutra, in fact, it indirectly talks about the luminous Buddha nature. Therefore, lots of the wise ones place the Surangama Sutra as one of the sutras that talks about the third turning of the Dharma wheel. So over here, the Buddha asked Ananda, well, you said that the 12 ayatanas are the Buddha nature. But over here, Ananda doesn't really want to reply anymore. It seems that Ananda started to keep quiet. Maybe he's really smart. He knows that if he doesn't even answer the Buddha will continue to expound. So he doesn't really talk anymore. After the Buddha posed the question, since Ananda did not say anything, at the beginning, Ananda responded lots of questions, but maybe at this point, Ananda got quite tired. Therefore, he didn't really respond to Ananda's respond to the Buddha's question. And then the Buddha continued to say, Ananda, again, let's look at the 12 ayatanas, and the description of the 12 ayatanas are talked in pairs. For example, the eye with the form, and the ear with the sound, and the nose with the fragrance. It is talked in such a way. Over here, the Buddha said that, Ananda, look again at the trees in the Jet Grove, and the fountains and the pools. What do you think? Do these things come into being because of the forms are produced, and thus the eyes see, or does the eyes produce the characteristic of form? The Jata Grove, as we are aware, there are lots of trees and fountains and pools.
们现在就是我们如果当做阿难的话呢，我们前面可能大家都在房子里面，就是没有那个树林和没有水泉，但是你们自己就是前面也可以看，如果有一些树啊，
since we are trying to walk in the shoes of Ananda, we probably don't really see those trees and the fountains and so on because we're sitting in a house. But you can look at other things, for example, a statue, the Buddha statue, or pole, or whatever things that you're looking at. Over here, the Buddha told Ananda, saying that, look at our environment, it's really beautiful. There are forests and the fountain and spring and the pools. It's really beautiful.
我们见到的这些呢，此等是色啊，就是圣眼见呢。就是这个外面的这个水池和
Now,
外
what do
面
you
的树
think?
林，这
Do
些
these
呢
things
产生
come
我们的
into
这个
being
颜
because
色，
the
这就是
forms
眼
are
见呢
produced
或者呢
and
就
thus
是
the
是
eyes
我们的
see,
这个眼根呢就是产生这
or
些外面的
because
这
the
个
eyes
树林和
produce the
水泉当中
characteristic of
色
form?
相就是问两个问题吧，就是意思是
The
我
two
们的这个
questions.
见是依靠外境而产生的呢，还是是依靠眼根而
First
产
is
生的？
that
就实际上是
do
也
our
是这个意思吧。
is
就是这样
our
问的时候呢，
seeing
我们自
produced
己也可以
because of
想
the
我们看到的
environment,
这些东西是从这个
or
眼睛当
is
中
it
产生
produced
的吗？还
because
是
of
外
the
境
eye
当中产生
faculty?
的？就是这个问起来就是好像比较简单的，
It
但是
seems
实际上
very
让我回
easy.
答
It
的
seems
话呢，可
such
能也
an
要
easy
这个
question, isn't it?
就考虑一下啊，就如
But
果
now you can
眼
think
睛
it.
当中产
You
生的
can
话，
think
有什么
about this
过失？
question.
如果
How
外境
would
当
you
中产生的话呢，
respond
有
to
什
the
么过失？
question?
就是我们要
What
要这
would
个考虑。
be the
然后阿难呢，
downfalls
就是还是
if
什么都不
the
说了，
seeing
就一直等着。
comes
在
from
这
the
个时候，阿
eyes
难
or
呢，
seeing
就
comes
是若
from
夫
the environment?
眼根
The
身
Buddha
色
continued
相
to say,
色
Ananda,
见
if the
空
organ
非
of
色
sight were to
色
produce
性
the
影
characteristic
小
of form,
小
then
则
the nature of form
宪
would
法
be
一切度
obliterated when you see
首
emptiness,
先
which
是
is
第
not form.
第二个问
Once
题
it
吧，
was
刚才问的时候这个是放
obliterated,
在第二，
everything
就是
that
然
is
后
manifested
如果
would
你说是
disappear,
这个
since the
眼根当中
characteristic of
我们
form
的这个
would
眼根
be
当中呢
would
就是
then be
产生这
absent.
个外面的这个树
Who
林当
would
这些色
be
相
able
就
to
是
understand
如
the
果你
nature
说
of
是这个
emptiness? The same is
这
true for
个外面
emptiness.
见的这个东西的话呢，
Now
就
let's
是如果
look
是
at
是
the
眼
first
根当
one.
中这个产生的话呢，那就是不合理的。
If you
怎么
were
不
to
合
say
理呢？
that
因为那
it
个
comes
是
from
这
the
个
eye
眼根
faculty,
当中这个产
because
生就是这些色
if it
相是
were
吧？
to
眼
be
根当中产
produced
生
from
色
the
相。
eye
那
faculty,
这样的话呢，如果我们见到这个空的话呢，
then
就
when
是
we
见
see
到这个虚空
emptiness,
见到这
when
个
we
虚
see
空的话
space,
呢，就是那虚空肯定不是这些色相，
it
就
is
是非
not
色。那
forms,
这样的话
because
呢，就是
space
那个
is
色的这
non-form.
种相就是色相的话呢，就
Emptiness
是它
is not
没有
form.
这个见证，就是这样呢，就是自然而然就是会消
Once
亡的。
it was
如果这
obliterated,
个
everything
色
that
相
is
呢自然而然
manifested
消亡
would
的话呢，
appear.
那么孝字宪法一切度故。那如果色相这个消亡
Since
的
the
话呢，
characteristic
那就
of
是色相
form
消亡的
would
缘
then
故
be
的话呢，
absent,
一切
who
就是
would be
先前
able to
所见到
understand
的
the
这
nature
些
of
色法的
emptiness?
现象呢，全部就是这个一无所有了。就是
Everything
那这
would
样的
be
话呢，
empty.
就是我
Everything
们
would
这
be
个
gone.
这个所有的人呢，
Everything
就
would be
是
absent.
就眼前呢，就是全部都是像
Whatever
虚空
we
一样的，
see
就是
in front of
所
our
有的
eyes
这
would be
个
just
就
like
是
space.
林林总总的，或者说是形形色
All
色
the
的这些外境
varieties
的
of
相的话呢，
forms
就是都
and
不会存在的。
the
但是实际上呢，
characteristics
我们都不
would
能
be
这样
absent.
承认因为
But
确
of
实是
course,
这样
that's
一
not
打开
true,
眼一
because
睁开
whenever
眼
we
睛的
open
话
up
呢，
our
那我们
our
这个
eyes,
前
we
面的
would
这
be
些
able to
设
see
法
all
呢，
kinds
就
of
是
forms.
显亮而见到的，
We
这
see
就
it
是
with our
这个
direct perception.
显亮而成的就能见到的一切现象呢，这
We
是
would be
我
able
们
to
显亮
see
而成的。所
everything
以说呢，
that's
你不能这样
manifesting.
这个承认。
So
色相即有，如
that
果
is
说
not
是
true.
外面的所有的
Since the
这些
characteristic
色
of
相没
form
有的
would
话呢，
then be
那这个
absent,
色和空呢，
then
实际上是关待的。
who
就
would
是因
be
为
able to
我们的
understand
眼
the
见
nature
的
of
话呢，就是
emptiness?
实际上
Because
是有两种
form
情况，一
and
种是我们
emptiness,
眼
in
睛见
fact,
到的这
they
个色相
are
的这种情
related
况
to each
还有
other.
一种情况呢，眼睛就是
If
见不
we
到
can
就是
see
任
it
何
with
的这
our
种
eyes,
状况，
in
就
fact,
是
there
像
are
这个
two
看到虚空一样的。
possibilities. The
就像
first
我们
one
那
is that
天
our eyes
上面
could
分析
perceive
的时候
form,
呢，
and the
要么
other
我们
one
会
is
见到这个
that
光
the
明，要么
eyes
见到
cannot
是
see
黑暗的。
anything,
除
which
此
is
之外呢，
emptiness, just
没
like
有第三
seeing
个对
the
象
space
就
or
没有第
emptiness.
三个对境。同
The
样的
other
道
day
理，
when we
如
made
果
the
这个我们
analysis that
这
if
个
we were to
色
see
相的这些迹
light,
象呢，
then
全部都没
we
有
would
的
not
话呢，
be able
那
to
睡
see
眠空
darkness, or if we see darkness, we won't be able to see light. And there is no third possibility. For the same reason, if the form that we perceive if we can perceive form, then we won't be able to see emptiness, and if emptiness, then not form. Because they correlate with each other. They are existent only because the other one exists. In the Heart Sutra, we talk about how form is emptiness, emptiness is form. Because if there is no form, then there is no emptiness. If there's no emptiness, there is no form. Earlier, we talked about how earlier the Buddha said that if you were to say that the root of the eye faculty to produce the form, or to say it the other way, that if the eye faculty were to produce emptiness in that way, seeing the form at that time, then there is no emptiness. Then there is no emptiness, there is absence of emptiness. Once there is absence of emptiness, then there is nothing. Because the opposite of form is emptiness. If form doesn't exist, so does the emptiness. If emptiness doesn't exist, so does the form. Now the second question, if moreover the defiling objects of form were to produce the eye seeing, if one were to say that the eye to produce the form is incorrect, this is something that we studied in Buddhist logic. It is says that the object, which is the focal condition, along with our dualistic mind and the eye faculty, with all the causes and conditions matured, then there is eye consciousness. If one were to say that the object, let it be garden or fountain, whatever they are, only when they exist, then there is the product that is seeing. If you were to say that, then you're saying that eye consciousness derived from the form. Now, let me ask you, when I look at emptiness, because emptiness is definitely not form, in this way, do I see emptiness or not? Because the cause of seeing is simply empty. Therefore, the logical inference is the same as the previous ones. Then who would be able to understand emptiness and form? Since emptiness and form, they rely on each other to be existent or to manifest. Therefore, if one were to say that, oh, I'm looking at emptiness, this is not reasonable and it's not valid. But people may think that, well, it doesn't matter because sometimes I would look at the forest and sometimes the forest would give birth to my eye consciousness. And later I would look at the darkness, or sometimes I would look into the space. Therefore, it doesn't necessarily mean that there has to be one existence and then the other one needs to disappear if one exists. In fact, this one we've also analyzed this particular grasping before. It simply shows that our grasping is a grasping to totality, is a grasping to a solid existence as a whole. So over here, the key of understanding it is that everything that we can perceive, the form, are no other than the production of causes and conditions. According to Lankavatara Sutra, it says that everything derived from causes and conditions, therefore they all uptake the false nature or false characteristic. All conventional phenomena are a product of falsity, and within its absolute truth. In fact, there is no arising, there is no production at all. We should understand that. Therefore, you should know that neither seeing nor form nor emptiness has a location. For this reason, we can come to this particular conclusion, that is, the root and the location
就是同时是这个空的。
They
那
are
这样的话呢，就是没
both
有处，
empty.
因为这里12处吧，就是12处的话呢，
The
其实我们
12
严格意义
places,
这
the
个处
12
也是不
ayatanas,
存在的，
in
就刚才
fact,
通过
the
剑来
eye
分析
faculty is
的。
considered as
然后
one
这个
place
色
as
寸的
well.
话呢，就是也是
It
一个
is
处，
not
这个也是不
existent
存在的。
either.
所以说呢，就是即色与见二处虚妄。那么这
And
个
thus,
色
the
和
two
见
places
呢，
of
就
form
是
and
实际上
seeing
这
are
两个
empty
处
and
呢，就是
false.
这个虚
The
妄的，
form
就是
and
虚假
seeing
的。
are
所以
both
说呢，就
empty
是
and
本非
false.
因缘，非自然
Their
性。
origin
因
is
此呢，
not
就是它本来的是没有一种这
in
个固
causes
定的
and
这种因缘和
conditions,
非因缘
nor
产生的，
do
也
their
没有这
natures
个固定
arise
的一种这个自然
spontaneously.
和非自然这个产生的。那是什么样呢？就是实际上是就像我们前面就是讲过的一
Then
样，
what
就
is
是
it?
在神意当中的话呢，
It is
就是
exactly like how
原
we
理四边八
already
行。
talked
实数
before.
当中的话呢，
In
就是
absolute
如母入
truth,
幻呢，就是
it
没有
is
真实的法。
devoid
其实
of
这
the
个
four
是我们
extremes
不
and
管
the
是
8
见
in
到的法，还
operations.
是听
In
到
the
的法，他们的
conventional
真
sense,
正的本来
it
面目呢，就是
manifests
这样的。
just as a
就是
dream and
应
as
该
an
是
illusion.
这个
There
入
is
能切经
nothing
里
that
面
is
讲的
truly
吧，就是
existent.
三界性迷
So
惑，是
whatever
故
we see,
见
whatever
故
we
无
hear,
见
that's
就
the
是
true
三界
nature
性
of
迷
it.
惑。三界
According
的这
to
种性呢，
Lankavatara
就是
Sutra, it says
迷
that
惑的，就事
the
故种种
mind
见的。
of
所
the
以种
three
种见呢，
realms
梦即世
are
间法，
confused.
此
Therefore, there are all kinds of
法
seeing.
平等就是梦和世间法。
The dream
梦和
and
这个
the
世间法的话
conventional
呢，此二平
phenomena
等法，就是此二法平等。
are
意思就是
completely
说，这个
equal.
这个所有我们的这个见的话呢，实际上是梦里面的这种现象和
The
实践的这
seeing
些
that
所
we
有的这种现
experience
象的法的话呢，
are no
那
other
完
than
全
the
都是
seeing that we have in our
平等的。
dreams.
就是其实
They
我
are
们
of great
到达这样的这个
equanimity.
境界的
If
话
we
呢，
can
就是那
reach
是
to
应该
that
是就是
realization,
很
that
棒的，
level
对
of
吧？就是
realization,
非
that
常
would be
非常好的。
wonderful.
因为
Since
我们
nowadays
现在
our
这个
biggest
最主要
obstacle
的就是
is
人
that
们
we
呢，就是
grasp
可能
onto
是
what we
这
see
个眼睛呢，
and
就
we
是
hold
对我们
on
就
to
是
what we
造成
see
很大的
as
这个
truly existent.
这种畏缘。为什么呢？
Therefore,
因为我们
whatever
见到的就
we
是都认为是这个实有的
see,
东西就是从早上起来睁开眼
we
睛，
hold
一看
on to
看
it
就是
as
你的
truly
缸是实有的
existent
存在的，
and
你的灯是这个存在的，你的
we
碗是
look
存
at,
在的，
for
你的
example,
这个手机是
your
存在的，电脑是
fireplace
存
is
在的，
truly
火警是存
existent,
在
same
的，
as
就是
your
所有
lamp,
的东西
your
呢，就
bowl,
是是有
your
这个存在的。那么如果我们
your
有
cell
今天的
phone,
这样的
your
观察方
laptop,
式就
and
是
your
佛陀呢，就是带阿难，就是跟那个祈愿净
scriptures,
色的这个
everything,
森林作
you,
为一个对
you
镜，
see
就是
them
你
as
看
a
看
truly
这个，就是
existent.
你看，就是那么你
So
的这个
today,
见
with this
和
kind of
外面的这个净色之间
method
的关
of
系是什么样？
making
当时这个阿
observation,
难不知道通达
just
没有，
like
他
how
也没有，
the
即使
Buddha
他通
lead
达，他现
Ananda
在都不
to
想
make
说话
this
了，就是这样的。
observation
然后
with the
他就
objects
什么没有
of
说，
the
但是
forest
呢，
and
我们就
fountains
是也
in
不
the
仅仅
Jeta
是这个
Grove,
机缘净色的一
why
个
don't
这
you
个设
also
定吧。
look
就
at
我
the
们
connections
任何的这
between
种
your
所见
object
所闻
and
的
your
话，就
seeing?
是实际上是
Not sure
确
if
实是依
Ananda
靠这种方式
understood
来
it
观
because
察
he's
的话
not
呢，
really saying
原来
anything,
是我
but
们
if we
无始以
can
来就
make
是
this
众生的无始以
observation,
来的是
we
就是
will be
见
able
识
to
就是
see
见
that
识。我
from
们
the
从
beginningless
小的时候
time,
见到什么
we
什么
kept
就
on
是
thinking
就
that
这样，
I
就是
see
一直
this,
说，
I
父
see
母也
that.
是说是你见到什么，老师也是说是你见到什么什么，
Your
但实际上呢，就
teachers
是
and
我
your
们的真正
parents
的
kept
见
on
呢，
saying
就是
that
如果
what
以
do
这
you
种方式
see
来观
and
察的时
do
候
you
的
see
话呢，
this and
而
that.
且
In
见
fact,
就是确
we
实是
had
这个一无所
never
得，就
truly
这个道理呢，
investigated
应
the
该是
seeing.
明白的。就
With
所
this
以说，
method,
为
we
什么
would
是
be
这
able
个大
to,
圆满
with
观
this
点的时
method
候
of
呢，就
making
经常有一
observation
个
of
是
seeing,
你的这个
then we
随
will
机呢，
understand
用
that
这
the
个就是
seeing
你
is
看看，
truly
让你看看的时
unattainable.
候呢，实际上自己的心
That
也
is
是这样
why
的。外面
whenever
的这个设
we
法也是
receive
这样
the
的，内外
the
这个透明的，
Ati
就是不透
empowerments,
彻无碍
usually
的。
there's
你
a
通过这种方式来认识自己的
crystal
心的
that is
话呢，也
presented,
是
a
很容
pure
易
and
就是
transparent crystal.
就是我
At
们
that
六
time,
处当
you're
中的这
looking
个
at
前
it.
两处
In
呢，这
fact,
个已
your
经
mind
就
is
讲完了。
exactly like that, and same as all the
然后
forms.
接下来
It
就是
is
就下面
completely
就开始
transparent
就
without
是
any
这
obstruction.
个
Through this way, you will be able to
超
recognize your
超
own
流
mind.
退
Now
退
we've
好是吧？
already covered the first two out of
下面
the
用
six
six that we're going to talk about. The next one is sound. What sound do we have? Right. I do have something prepared.
这个其实有个声音就可以的，但也许可能我看得到他们是不是有弄出来这种设法也行吧。下面第二个啊，就是第二个
The second ayatana is sound and ear. The Buddha said, Ananda, listen again to the drum being beaten in the Jata Grove when the food is ready. The Buddha told Ananda, saying that continue to listen carefully. At the time of meal, at the beginning of the meal, in order to gather all the Sangha together, there is the sound of drum. But usually, when we chant the sutras, we will beat in the drum, and then entering into the retreat, we will also beat in the drum. But usually, whenever we have meals, we use the gong. Strike the gong and beat in the drum. In some monasteries, sometimes nowadays in China mainland, they would use the woodfish. Usually around 3 or 4 a.m. in the monastery, the woodfish would be striked to signal the practice. It is said that the usage of woodfish is because the fish's eyes are always open. Therefore, it is a sign to signal the practitioner, or to remind the practitioners to be diligent and do not sleep too much. There's another story that I heard from some Chinese monk. He said that there was once a person who made great negative karma, and this person was reborn into a giant fish in a lake. And then on the body of the fish, a tree was grown. In order to liberate this particular person, the monks would keep on striking the wood, which looks almost like a fish shape, so that the monks can rededicate the merit to that particular person. But I didn't really look into the origin of the woodfish. There are a few different names to it.
铅锤是吧？干枝啊，就是一般那个戒律里面就是经常用的那根干枝啊，就是这个，就我们不是诵戒的时候也经常用。
We constantly use a different term when we chant the precepts.
汉地也是有，就是可能藏地的话呢也有点。
In terms of the gong,
但这个不管是这个。
The Chinese monasteries also use it, but maybe a bit different than that of the Tibetan region's monasteries. So let it be striking or beating the drum or whatever it is, whatever kind of sound or instrument it is.
过一天算一天，就是这样的，就是然后就这种说法吧，就是那这样的话庄重的话那么这个不管是重的声音，
Let it be the sound of
就是钟鼓应
the gong or the sound of drum.
那这个它的声音呢，就是一直
Over here, the Buddha said that the sound of the bell and the drum follows one another in succession.
就传来，就是这个大家都知道。
And then that's how the sound is made. Let it be drum or bell, the sound would keep coming in sequence. Over here, we rather use the sound of conch. We would blow the conch, which is quite important. I think the practitioners over here do place great importance to the sound of the conch. But some people's conch are missing, or sometimes people would fall asleep before even to blow the conch. And some of you are not very good at blowing the conch, and the sound doesn't sound very beautiful. Rather, it sounds like an yak. According to the sutra, it says, let it be the drum or the bell, let it be the conch or gong.
the sound of such that signals the teaching of Dharma, once upon hearing it, one would be exempt to fall into the three lower realms. So whenever we blow the conch, we need to keep that in our mind, we need to practice it, because at the time of turning the Dharma wheel, the celestial beings offered the right turning conch to Shakyamuni Buddha. With this kind of causes and conditions, whenever we blow conch, it is an auspicious sign. So I need to emphasize this. We need to practice it, and we need to cherish this tradition. So today we will pay attention together of listening to the sound at this part, because it could lead us to recognize the nature of it. The Buddha over here says that, what do you think? Do these things come into existence because the sound comes to the region of the ear, or because the ears goes to the place of the sound? Whatever sound it is, once it comes to your ear,
就是声音呜呜就直接从那边来到你的耳边呢，你的耳朵呢就是呜呜就是直接就是就本来我们这个耳朵是一块嘛，就是然后阿难的耳朵不知道怎么样，就是然后是不是你的耳朵跑到声音那儿去呢？就是然后声音跑到
The Buddha asked, is it that the ear goes to the sound, or the sound comes to your ear? And then the Buddha continued to ask Ananda, saying that again, Ananda, suppose the sound comes to the region of the ear. Similarly, when I go to beg for food in the city of Shravasti, I am no longer in the Jeta grove. He said that if the sound of the conch or from the drum directly comes to your ear, it is like that whenever I go to beg for alms into Shravasti. Again, there are different Chinese translations of Sarasvati. The Buddha said that if I were to go to Sarasvati to beg for alms, as an individual, the Buddha goes there to beg for alms. Then how could there be another Buddha stays in Jeta grove? Similarly, if the sound comes from the conch or drum, if the sound definitely goes to the region of Ananda's ear, then neither Madhikalayana nor Kashyapa would hear it, because if the sound is something solidly existent, just like if the Buddha left Jeta grove and enters into the city Sarasvati, then you won't be able to see the Buddha in Jeta grove anymore. Similarly, if the sound has an entity, then that means if the sound travels from the instrument to the ear of Ananda, then none of the other people would be able to hear it, even as the great arhats such as Madhikalayana and Kashyapa, and even less the 1250 Shramanas who, upon hearing the sound of the bell, come to the dining hall at the same time. At that time, the Buddha had his retinues, the 1250 Shramanas, including both the bhikshus and bhikshunis. Then at that time, nobody would be able to hear it, because the sound is an entity, and you cannot separate the sound. If it enters into the ear, the region of the ear of Ananda, then how could the other people hear it and gather at their dining hall anymore?
那这样的话呢，就是不是刚才那个就是这个声音呢，就是从那边离开，就直接
The Buddha says that if the sound directly goes to Ananda, then how could all the other Shramanas hear the
同一
sound
个时间当中的话呢，这
at
个
the
众
same
生呢，
time?
就是
That is,
就
how
这些
could
沙门呢，就是怎么来这
the
个听得到，
large
就是因为
Sangha
他们吃
all
饭的地
hear
方
the
的话
sound
呢，
at
要
the
这
same
个
time?
击中这个僧众嘛，就是这样的话呢，那
Because
这个
the
庄
function
重的
of
这
the
个声
bell
音呢，
is
就
to
是
call
怎么会是
everyone
让
to
这
the
个听
dining
到
hall.
呢？就是不能这个听到的意思吧？就是好像后面是另外有一种解释，但应该这样的吧？你们再看一下。
There could be another
这是第一
explanation
个
of
方
this
面的这个观察，
particular word
就是
that is used.
这是第一个方面的观察，或者的话，对，就是应该，若夫入耳，王必胜变，就是。
Again,
但这个呢，我们
suppose
一般
that
可能不会
the
说。
ear
如果
goes
你
to
的
the
耳朵
region
呢，
of
就
the
是跑到那
sound.
个
Usually
就是
we
超
don't
过
say
了这个
that.
声音
If
里
your
去的
ear
话
were
呢，
to
那这个
go
也
to
是
the
就像是
sound,
这个如我贵
go to the
主
drum.
就是如我贵主其陀宁种在示罗城则无有我，就是那么这样的话呢，
Then
就像
it
是
is
我从那
similar
个
to say that when I
这个示
return to
罗城
Jeta
呢，就
Grove,
是没有
I'm
这
no
个
longer
回
in
来
the city
回来以
of
后呢，我到
Shravasti.
了这个七元金色一样，就是因为佛陀是一个显现上是
The
一个
Buddha
人嘛，
as an
一个人的话呢，
entity,
那就
as an
从这个示罗
individual,
法城就是回来的话呢，就那边
when
就已经
he
没有了，然后
returned
那边没
to
有的
Jeta
话呢，
Grove,
已经到
he
了
is
这
no
个七元
longer
金
in
色
the
就是这
city
样
of
的。那同
Shravasti.
样的道理就是，那么如果
Similarly,
你的耳朵就是
when
到
you
那
hear
边
the
去的话
sound
呢，
of the
那我
drum,
的这
your
个阿
ear
难
will
的耳根
already
的话呢，
have
就是跑到
gone
那
to
边
the
去了。这
place
边
where the
阿
drum
难呢
is
就是
being
没有
beaten.
耳朵了，或者是阿难
Ananda
他
at
自
that
己也
time
是被这
either
个耳朵
doesn't
牵
have
着
the
就是
ear
跑
at
到那
that
个故事那
moment,
去了。
or Ananda's been
然后那
dragged
个
by his ear to the drum.
如果这样的话呢，就是如闻故僧其耳以往
If that is the case,
以
thus
往
when the bell
既故
peals,
之处，
you
就
will
是
not
这样的话呢，你
hear
听
the
到这个故
sound,
声的时候呢，
even the
那么你
less
的这个
that
耳
of
根的话呢，
elephants,
就是
horses,
也
cows,
是往
sheep,
那个击
and
鼓的
all
这个
other
声音的
various
地
sounds
方。
around
那么
you.
这个时候呢，就是终身其出不应俱闻，就是那如果在
At
这
that
个时候呢，
time,
就是同一个时间里面就是发出那个庄重的声音的话呢，那你不应该这个
you
声
will
的，因为
not
你
be
的耳根
able
就是跑到那
to
个击鼓的这个地方去了。
hear
那
other
身在
sounds
哪里
because
享受
your
的话呢，那
ear
这边就是
already
在
went to
这个刚才那
the
个
place of the
击
drum,
中
so
僧
you
众的
will
话呢，
not
又
be
要
able
这个可
to
能超过
hear
就是又要这个庄重，就是那这样的话呢，就是如果你的耳根就是
the
跑到这
bell,
个
because
就是
at that
敲
moment
敲
maybe
鼓
there's
的
the
那个
sound
地方
of
去的
bell
话
and
呢，
then
那
there's
这
the
边
sound
庄
of
重呢
drum.
就是根本就是听不到。
If
更
Ananda's
何
ear
况
were
说
to
是
be
那个
dragged
还有
to
这
the
其
drum,
他
then
的
he
什么
won't be
大
able
象
to
的
hear
声
the
音啊，
bell.
就是牛马的声音啊，
Also,
羊的
Ananda
声音
won't be able to
种
hear
种
all
声
the
音呢，就是
other
都听不
animals,
到
the
的。就是
elephants,
那这样的
horses,
话，
and so
你的
on.
耳根是
Ananda
只有
will
一个
not
耳
be
根，
able
这
to
个耳
hear
根呢，
other
就
things because
就
there's
属于
only
一个这
one
个声音当中
ear
去了的话呢，
faculty.
那其他的包
If
括就
one
是什么
ear
啊，我
faculty
们这
were to
个
be dragged to that one
现
sound, you
现
won't
在
be
的
able
话
to
呢，就
hear
是有
other
时候
sounds.
是这个怎么讲啊？就是比如
Nowadays
说里面就
in
是这个
Larungar, we
听到
have
一
all
个
kinds
这
of
个啪啪的
sounds.
声音的话呢，我们最近不是他
Sometimes
们
we
放着
hear
微
the
信嘛，就是
sounds of
好多拖拉
the
机哒
Dharma
哒哒哒
teaching.
哒
While
哒
you're
哒哒
listening
哒
to
哒
the
哒，
Dharma,
有
there
一个
is
拖拉机
the
上去了，有哒哒
tractor
哒哒哒哒哒，有一个下来，有
coming
哒哒哒
back
哒
and
哒哒哒
forth.
上去了，那这些都不应该这个听得到，
If
对
you're
吧？就
only
是以前
listening
有什
to
么
the
这个
Dharma teaching, you won't be able
就
to
是
hear
这
the
个山的
other
外面就
background
是有
noise.
这个狼的声音啊，狗的声
In
音
the
啊，
past, we
还有
sometimes
就
could
是
hear
各
the
种这个
wolves
什么
and
乌鸦的
the
声音、
dogs
喜鹊的
and
声音
the
就
crows
种种声
and
音
the
吧，就是但
magpie,
现
all
在
kinds of
就
sounds.
我们最夏天的时候，
But
就是听到的
nowadays,
最
in
多
the
的声
summer,
音就
the
是
most
这个拖拉机
heard
的声音，
sound is the tractor
哒哒哒
sound.
哒，好像晚上这个12点钟
It
的时候，
seems
哒哒
like
哒哒哒哒哒
even by
这个
midnight,
如果修行比较
we
好的
hear
人的
lots
话
of
呢，哇，
that
就是一看这
tractor
种声音
sound.
呢，然后就是我的耳朵跑到
As a
拖拉
good
机那里去了
practitioner,
呢，拖拉机的声音
I
跑到我
believe
的
you
耳
can
朵里，
practice
然后这样一观想就是
to
哇，
see
马上就
whether
证悟
your
了，
ear
然后
faculty
他就
went
马
to the
上特
tractor
别
or not.
感恩那个拖拉机的事迹，就
And
是
by
让
making such observation, maybe this practitioner would attain enlightenment and would be very grateful to the tractor
他这
driver.
样的这个若无往来，就是那这样观察的话呢，就是我的耳根跟那个声音呢，就是既然就是没有这个往
If
来
there
啊，
is
就是
no
也没
coming
有
or
我
going,
的这个耳根呢没有就是去哪里，
if there is
就是
no
然后声
coming
or going of your ear to the drum or the drum to you, there will be no hearing either.
Therefore, you should know that neither heering nor sound has a location. By making such observation, you will be able to see that both the sound and the one who hears, or the hearing, doesn't have a location. And thus, the two places of hearing and sound are empty and false. There is no faculty, and there is no object, that is the sound. There is no ear, and there is no sound. Other than those two, there is nothing else either. According to Mahaprajna Paramita Shastra, there is the observation of the ear faculty, the sound, and then the ear consciousness. I translated a little bit of it. There are 100 volumes in Mahaprajna Paramita Shastra. I translated a bit during the winter, but it's too busy for me in the summer. Do you hear the tractors now? Sometimes I think the sound of tractors sounds quite beautiful because there is a very distinct memory of it. If we were to be taught by our parents that the most beautiful, most melodious sound is the sound of the tractor, then we would very much enjoy the sound of tractor. I guess you can agree with that. Anyhow, it says that thus the two places of hearing and sound are empty and false. Their origin is not in causes and conditions, nor do their natures arise spontaneously. Just as stated in the Great Ornament Sutra, it says that just like Kongho, the instrument, which is a Chinese harp, the strings and the hands, apparently this particular instrument is not very well played nowadays. It used to be very famous, and in the sutras, this particular instrument were constantly mentioned. So it says that the string and the hand makes the sound, but there is no coming or going. So it says that the instrument and the string and the hand, the three of them, would work together so that the sound would be produced. Just like the Kongho instrument, the string, the instrument, and the hand all work together to produce a sound. However, the sound doesn't have any coming and going. After the sound of this instrument was played, however, this particular sound is reliant on the string and reliant on the instrument itself as well as the movement of the hand. Then there is the sound. When we make the observation, there is no coming and no going. The great masters of the past, the Zen masters, as well as great numbers of the Vajrayana masters, by relying on the sound of music, by relying on the observation of the sound of the four great elements, such as the sound of fire, or sound of the water, flowing water, or the sound of the wind blowing on the peak of a mountain, by relying on those sound, those great masters would recognize the nature of mind, because the teaching is very similar. So let's listen to a sample of the Kongho instrument. Could you play it?
Good. That was the direct pointing out through the sound. This is the method that's given in the Surangama Sutra. The Buddha then continues to address Ananda to give him the teaching, the instruction on the smell and the nose faculty. Moreover, Ananda, you smell the chandana in this censer. When one particle of this incense is lit, it can be smelled simultaneously through 40 li. 1 li is about 30 miles around the city of Shravasti. The Buddha continued to tell Ananda, saying that, why don't you give it a good smell? Says there is the chandana in the chandana incense that is burning. But I believe this chandana is not the ordinary chandana, though whenever we talk about chandana, it is of great fragrance. In the past, there are different types of chandanas. The chandana of the shape of the snake, chandana of the shape of the ox head. Those were extremely expensive and very rare to be found. So the smell can extend to 40 li. 40 li is about 20 kilometers. Some of the calculation says that 1 kilometer is about 2 li. Do we have any incense right now? Usually we have incense, isn't it? Didn't I tell you that we're going to need some incense today? In terms of the incense, I would like to remind you that when we purchase incense over here, whomsoever over here buys incense, I hope that you make it clear that we do not make advertisement to any of the factories that makes incense. I heard that there are people simply telling others that they are the sole provider to our incense use. Since Larangar is quite an influential monastery and institution, I hope that people do not use our brand or our name to propagate and to advertise for their products, because we're not here to practice any business. Oh, that's very little bit of incense. Who can smell it? It won't be spreaded for 40 li. You can't even smell it after 4 meters. It's okay, don't be so nervous. Another thing I would like to address, whatever departments you are in, if you are selling anything that is related to the Buddha statue and the stupas and things like such, or the sutras and shastras, I think it's quite important to be smart about it. Let it be The Dharma teachers or the management team, you have to be very careful because we're not here to make advertisements of the various kinds of products. In the past, I heard that all kinds of products were made on behalf of Larangar and with the branding of Larangar, and they sell it for a very high price. The Dharma teachers over here, they're very good at the five treatises, but not very good in business. And sometimes they're very much used by people with alternative intentions. This is not appropriate. Whatever we use, the Buddha statues and the prayer wheels, all of those products should be scrutinized by the Dharma teachers and the management team so that they won't be sold at a very high price. Some people, I noticed that there are Buddhists and sometimes there are people who pretend to be Buddhists. And people who pretend to be Buddhists, they have the alternative motive to make more money, make more profits. And the pricing would be rocket high by using the name of saying so-and-so give special blessings to the object, or there is the special consecration of this Buddha statue, and then they will ask for a very high price. They would say that, oh, this is the Buddha statue, that is very special, this is very rare stupa, this is with the very sacred consecration. By those kinds of names, they would sell things at an unreasonable price. I'm not saying this to specifically targeting someone, but I think this needs our special attention, otherwise you could be used, and it's not good for us, it's not good for Dharma teachers, and it's not good for the people who sell them either. Anyhow, if you're at home and listening to this class, then at this time you can lit an incense, whatever material it is made, the chandana or other kinds of incense.
就是说是这里呢，就是如果他这里译注的话，那就是译注是好像那个就是比如说是这个1/24的这种量啊，就是很小很小的一点点。
The Buddha said that there is
翻译的是就是这个像
one particle. The one particle is 1/24th.
实际上呢，就是在40这个文讯的地方呢，就是度这个
1/24th of 量, which is a very small amount of it. That's a Chinese measurement.
也讲到当时这个汉武帝的时候啊，就是汉武帝的时候呢，就是有一点点的那个。
According to the commentary of Surangama Sutra composed or taught by Master Yuan, he said that during the time of Emperor Han Wu, at the time of him, when one were to burn the chandana incense that is as the size of a pea, the fragrance would permeate over 40 li, which is 20 kilometers. And then the fragrance will be permeating and will not disperse for a whole month. Also, within this 20 kilometers, all the disease and illness will be all disappeared. So whenever we lit us incense, if it could refresh air and it could uplift our spirit, this would be a great function. But we have to be careful because lighting incense is could be a fire hazard, so we have to be a bit careful as well. We need to be safe, right? Lately, I got very interested in fire prevention. Today, I met some of the authorities from fire prevention. At the beginning, some of our management team had various different mindset, but after meeting those authorities, I was very happy, and they were very happy too, because fire prevention is indeed really important. It is a way to protect our life and our wealth, our provisions. Therefore, we need to all keep in mind of fire prevention, especially over here, whatever buildings that we have over here, and we need to have a fire extinguisher, and we need to have the path or the route for the fire trucks. Those are quite necessary. Otherwise, since everything is so impermanent, we need to have those preventions ready. This is something that we need to place great importance. We definitely need it.
下面就是讲到是什么呢？就是刚才讲到啊，就是这样的这个分享呢，就传导于这个40里的地方。
We've already learned that this Chandana fragrance can be spread over 40 li. And then the Buddha said that, what do you think? Is this fragrance produced from the Chandana wood? Is it produced in your nose, or does it arise within emptiness? Where does it come from? Does it come from the Chandana wood, the incense, or does it come from your nose? Again, Ananda, suppose the fragrance is produced from your nose. What is said to be produced from the nose should come forth from the nose.
你的鼻子当中就是产生这个香的，是吧？那这样的话呢，就是当从鼻处，就是这样的话呢，你的这个鼻
If it comes from your nose, then from your nostrils or from your nose faculty, there should be the fragrance in there already, but that is not reasonable. Your nose is not Chandana, but your nose is made of flesh. There is no Chandana incense in it at all. Then how could there be a fragrance of Chandana from your nose? That is not reasonable, isn't it? Inside our nose, there is the snot, and then there's the nose hair. Is that how it's called? Can you call it nose hair?
可以吗？眼睛是睫毛是吗？鼻子怎么说？鼻毛可以说是吧？确定吗？
Are you sure?
好嘛。
All right.
那鼻子里面肯定没有赞叹，就是所以只有。
Anyhow, there's the snot and the nose hair in your nose, but there's definitely not even an ounce of Chandana.
然后那个如就是什么沉如闻香。
When you say you smell fragrance.
然后沉如闻香啊，就是当于这个，再加上呢，你这个闻到那个香是吧？
When you smell the fragrance,
所谓的这个
it
闻到
should
香的
enter your
话呢，就是
nose.
应该是当于这个鼻入，就是一般我们闻香的时候呢，
Whenever we smell anything, it is the fragrance enters into our nose. For the nose to emit fragrance is not the meaning of smelling.
所闻非议，就是你本来一般的这种常识的话呢，就是那个鼻子当中入了这个香气，然后就闻到了香。
Normally, we would say that the fragrance enters into our nose, and then that's how we smell the fragrance.
这种这个闻闻
So it is definitely not reasonable to say that the fragrance is inside your nose, or the fragrance exuberant from your nose. So it is definitely wrong. Now the second possibility is that suppose it is produced from within emptiness. The nature of emptiness is everlasting and unchanging. And so the fragrances should be eternally present. If you were to say that the fragrance comes from emptiness, as we know that the characteristic of space is everlasting and unchanging, so if fragrance comes from space, from emptiness, then the fragrance should also be everlasting and eternally present. What need should there be to rely on burning the dry wood in the censer? Because usually we need to burn the incense, but burn the fragrant wood so that the fragrance would be exuberated and spreaded. If you were to say that the fragrance comes from the space, then what's the point of burning? But nowadays we definitely need a censer and then burn the incense, and sometimes it takes a long time to burn it, and sometimes it takes a long time to lit it. Sometimes the match doesn't work, sometimes the lighter doesn't work. So that's the second possibility. The third possibility is that suppose it is produced from the wood. Now the nature of the incense is such that it gives off smoke when it is burned. This particular explanation is a bit different than the Tibetan translation, so I will try to explain it from the Tibetan translation. In the Tibetan translation, it says that if it comes from the wood, it says that the incense will burn and then give off smoke, and then there is the ash that's left over. Then why, after finish burning incense, the Chandana incense, after the Chandana incense has already degraded to ash and becomes smoke, then there is the fragrance. So this is the first why. And then the second why is saying that if the nose would be able to smell it, why the nose needs to rely on the smoke so that there is the smelling. That's the second why. Then the third why is saying that if it rises to the air, rises into air, and before it has reached the distance, how is it that the fragrance is already being smelled at a distance of 40 li, of 20 miles, of 20 kilometers? How is it that people would be able to smell it in such a long distance? In the Tibetan version, since it has 3 questions saying why, and why, I think it's easier to understand it. If we were to explain it from the Chinese translation, it says that if it is reliant on the Chandana wood itself, then after it finishes burning, it will become smoke. And then if the nose faculty will be able to smell it, then the smelling is dependent on the smoke and by the air. But the smoke cannot extend that far. So this could also be a summary. I think this is a better way of understanding it. In terms of fragrance, some great masters attained realization through smelling fragrance. According to the record of the Mount Jizu, there was once a master whose name is Xingche, and when he was practicing at the Jizu mountain, he made the aspiration of practicing meditation by standing for his whole life. He doesn't sit, doesn't sleep. That's his aspiration. So he practiced for a very long period of time, and then later he studied with the master
he studied with Master Yin Guang on the Surangama Sutra, after which he attained a certain level of realization. Later, when he lit one incense, he said that before before this incense finish burning, I will part from this world, and that's how he went to the Sukhavati, the Pure Land, before the incense was completely burnt. At that time, people could smell the fragrance and hear the sound of the Buddha while he passed away. Therefore, whenever we study the Surangama Sutra, I think there are the various very special causes and conditions, the very auspicious causes and conditions. For example, over here it says that the smelling and the faculty, we need to look into the various possibilities of where does it come from, where does the smelling come from. You need to make this kind of observation. Therefore, you should know that neither the fragrance nor no smelling has a location, and so the two places of smelling and fragrance are empty and false. Their origin is not in cause and condition, nor do their natures arise spontaneously. There is really nothing that is truly existent. Now we have already covered the first 6 places, 6 ayatanas out of the 12.